Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Erin, and I am one of the 6 founding members of Recovery Advocate Network. Today is our first coffee and conversation event, of which we'll be hosting these quarterly, and we're so excited to have you join us. The purpose of today's program is to help educate people, not only on what our organization is and what we aim to accomplish, but also to assist in opening the general dialogue around mental health, acknowledging the prevalence of mental health related issues in society and recognizing the large disparity in resources available for treatment. This morning, you will hear feature commentary from the client perspective, with one of our board members sharing her personal story of treatment and challenges with insurance. You will also hear a family perspective from someone who not only watched his brother suffer from mental health challenges, but also experienced firsthand what it means to have untreated mental illness within the family unit. And finally, you will hear a clinician's perspective from someone who is personally in recovery from substance abuse and has dedicated his life to helping others find their way when the world we live in does not make treatment and resources readily available. That said, our organization, Recovery Advocate Network, or RAN as we like to call it, took shape last summer as 6 of our founding members found each other through common ground. Some having experienced the challenges of finding treatment for mental illness firsthand, while others saw loved ones, family, and friends experience it. Long story short, we came together and recognized that society in general does not treat mental illness with appropriate measures. Much of mainstream society still harbors antiquated perceptions of what exactly it means to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder. For many, mental illness only means depression or anxiety, while others seem to classify it to mean only substance abuse or addiction. And even more so, others see it as PSD, trauma, process disorders, challenges with sexual identity, and so on. But the truth of the matter is, and part of why we are here today, is that they're all mental health related disorders, often which overlap each other, and individuals who are diagnosed with them deserve access to treatment, whether that be through individual therapy, outpatient programs, inpatient programs, support groups, and so on. Because of this, we at Recovery Advocate Network seek to remove the financial barriers to treatment by offering scholarships to those dedicated to their own healing. We hope to reduce the financial burden of the treatment with the hope that one day individuals with mental health challenges receive comprehensive and effective treatment without the worry of financial burdens to themselves or their families, and without the stigmas we so often see present in society today. With that being said, I will let Brian, one of my fellow board members, elaborate on this. Brian?
Thanks, Erin. Good morning, everybody. Glad you could be here with us today. We are so excited about the response we've had so far, establishing the Recovery Advocate Network and gaining an understanding of our place in the mental health and nonprofit industries. As Erin mentioned, Recovery Advocate Network's goal is to remove the financial barriers to treatment by offering scholarships for those dedicated to their treatment. We are committed to a thorough and medically backed approach to ensure funds are being distributed to provide mental health treatment to those who are truly dedicated to their own cause and their own recovery. For more information, check out recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. Follow us on Twitter, @RAN2Wellness, or our Facebook page. We are in our formation phase, and this event, Coffee and Conversation, is designed not only to be informative and raise awareness of mental health challenges present in society, but also to raise awareness of our mission. We can only offer scholarships when people like you, who care about the mental well-being of our society and future generations, support us. A society grows great when one plants trees under whose shade they will never sit. Our biggest ask today is that you consider supporting RAN and our mission. Yes, of course, we'd love to receive your donations, in addition to your time or sharing information about RAN with somebody else. I invite you to share some part of the story you hear today about Recovery Advocate Network or one of our wonderful speakers in a way that's impacted you with somebody over the next week over coffee. Everyone associated with this event has volunteered their time and expertise. We really appreciate our speakers and the board for making this happen. We have events focused on raising funds down the road, but today is about sharing. We want you to get to know RAN, and so when the time comes, you'll want to join the fight before we even ask. For anyone currently interested in volunteering time, send me an email, brian@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. There is a place for you here. There's lots that we've got going on. So let's get to it. First, how about some trivia? There we go. How much do you think it costs for 1 day of residential treatment on average? Take some time and think about it. And remember, the minimum recommended time is at least 28 days.
Hi, my name is Gia. I want to take a minute to talk about mental health and how it can impact anybody and everybody. It does not distinguish between people. Just like headaches and stomach aches can impact all of us, mental health illnesses can impact all of us to varying degrees, and any of us to varying degrees. It's high time we step up and increase awareness and break the stigma in society around mental health illnesses, and welcome open dialogue and conversations, especially in the workplace. Thank you.
I believe that it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. My business, there's a lot of ups and downs, and you need to have a middle ground. Don't let the highs be too high and the lows be too low. You can build everything else that you need from this foundation, whether it's spiritual well-being and mental well-being, physical well-being, your career, family, whatever. Groups like the RAND Network and other advocacy groups, they create a safe space for people to not feel marginalized. They feel normalized, and they can begin that process of creating that foundation and then achieving quality mental health. Thank you for this opportunity.
And the answer for our first trivia question, if you guessed E, correct. It's over $600 a day for residential mental health treatment. I do want to make a disclaimer before I introduce our first speaker that this is a mental health forum. There will be a variety of sensitive topics that will be discussed today, and maybe some triggers for some are hard to hear for others. If you're feeling uncomfortable or do not want to stay for the duration of the program, we understand and appreciate your ongoing support. That said, if you need resources for yourself or a loved one, please reach out and we'd be happy to provide reference information to you. Lastly, we'll have a Q&A series following the speakers. So please feel free to type any and all questions for any of our speakers, and they'll be asked to our speakers before the close of the program. Thank you. And now I turn things over to our first speaker, one of our Recovery Advocate Network founding members, Angela Gill-Nelms.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, my name is Angela Nelms, and I am here to share my story with you. In August of 2020, I decided to try something that many single men and women try: online dating. All of my friends encouraged it. They recommended this site or another, and I finally found one that seemed great. I mean, it appeared to rank your match based on answers to questions, and one male and I matched at 99%. What are the odds? Add to the fact he had pictures of a dog and camping and other fun things I loved. So clearly we set a first date. In the next few days, those days are hazy in my mind. We went on a few dates that week, and I quickly realized we were not a good fit, and I told him so. He, however, disagreed. On August 16th of 2020, I was kidnapped, held hostage, and raped for 5 days as he prepared to sell me into the sex trade. You see, I later found out that he had modified his account to align with mine. He had targeted me as his next victim. One moment, I saw a chance to escape and I ran, went to the police, where I was further traumatized by officers who were not trained on how to handle so severe of a situation. Eventually, I made my way to the Special Victims Unit and then to leave the state for 4 months. During this time, I sold my home, had my belongings moved to another side of town, and I eventually sold the vehicle that I owned that I knew he would recognize. To this date, I have still not returned to that corner block where I was kidnapped. When I look back at those days almost 2 years ago, a part of me actually believes they were the easy part. The difficult part has been learning to live with severe PTSD, with flashbacks, hypervigilance, and nightmares, which were eventually characterized as severe, persistent nightmare disorder. There's a reason that sleep deprivation is used as a form of torture, and why individuals with severe PTSD plus severe persistent nightmare disorder have such high suicide rates and often live a life not worth living. I personally feared going to sleep because I knew I would experience that defeat, entrapment, and hopelessness all over again. After trying every single sleep medicine protocol possible in conjunction with intense therapy, as well as an amazing PTSD service dog, Cuba, my treatment team advised for me to go to a treatment center so they could test out additional sleep medications in a safe environment to find something that would allow me to actually sleep and to begin to heal from my PTSD. Testing new medications actually takes time. However, on day 10 of treatment, I found out that my insurance dropped my coverage. You see, I was not a veteran or a first responder, and so my form of PTSD was not classified in a category that my insurance was willing to fund treatment for, and so they dropped coverage. Now, I shouldn't have been surprised, as I had observed this earlier in the year, as I saw others being dropped mid-treatment despite their efforts to work really hard and dropped by their insurance, but I was still surprised. You see, once again, I was actively doing everything I could to heal. I followed all of the recommendations of my doctors and therapists, and yet nothing could stop the debilitating nightmares. Insurance dropping my coverage was my final straw. Now, insurance will pay for someone to go to rehab for 30 to 40 days as many times as necessary, which I'm incredibly grateful for because I have many friends that fall into that category. And yet, I could only get 10 days for the violence I endured. The disparity and inequality of resource is severe. It's real. I am here today to tell you this story. However, many with similar situations either are no longer here, turned to drugs and alcohol, and or have not returned to active members of society, their families, and their communities. Recovery Advocate Network was founded to help those individuals dropped by insurance so they can do just that. Heal in a healthy place, a safe place, and return to a life worth living. Return to being active members of their families and communities. Our vision. We at RAN envision a world where individuals with mental health challenges of all types receive comprehensive and effective treatment without the worry of financial burdens to themselves or their families, all without the stigma they often present in society. Until that vision becomes a reality, we will continue to work to identify financial alternatives for treatment, continuously educate family, community members, and employers like our effort is today, and educate regarding the emotional, functional, and natural needs and abilities of people with mental health challenges. Today, you can join this fight. Now, I am going to ask, as one of the founding members and a donator as well to RAN, that you consider setting up a tax-deductible, reoccurring monthly donation via PayPal or donate via Venmo, and also select RAN as your Amazon Smile charity, and then shop at smile.amazon.com. Why? Because together, we can break the stigma and make a difference. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my story.
Thanks, Angela. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing that with us today. Before we go on to our next speaker, we have another trivia question for the group. So this one is for you to think about. What is the estimated number of adults with serious suicidal thoughts? Per Angela's comment, this affects not only adults, but children as well throughout our country and around the world. So give that some thought for a moment, and we'll be right back after this video.
I think it's safe to say that most on the planet, humanity is suffering severe mental health issues all the time. This pandemic really brought to light how important it is for us as humans to be vocal about these issues. The sad truth is suicide levels were at their highest during this pandemic. Isolation, people feeling stigma that they can't speak about it, can't ask for help, number one, is such a travesty. We're supposed to be moving forward as a species. We're supposed to be enlightened and living in a time where we're progressing and we're learning to be tolerant and respectful and accepting of people more than we ever have.
Mental health means to me that I can grow and strive in the things that I want to do every day and be able to set boundaries so that I can not be burnt out every single day.
So if you gave this some thought and you guessed letter E, 11 million plus, you would be correct. The percentage of adults reporting serious thoughts of suicide in the United States is basically 4.6. The estimated number of adults with serious suicidal thoughts is over 11.4 million, an increase of about 665,000 people in the last 2 years. With that in mind, I do turn things over to our second speaker, Jim. He will be giving us a perspective, the family perspective on mental illness and some notes from his experience. Jim?
Thanks so much, Erin, and the whole RAND team. What a brave journey that you just spoke, Angela, and thank you for sharing your story. So I'm Jim Schwabel. I am a survivor of suicide loss. I lost my brother to suicide roughly 7 months ago, so it's pretty recent. I'm here to tell his story and his journey and our family journey, and share just sort of any lessons learned that we have faced in our family, and the frustrations we feel, and ways that we potentially can move forward as a society and group. So my brother Tim, he was 3 years older than me. We grew up in many states. We moved 6 times growing up, but most of the time we spent in Portland, Oregon when we were really young. When I was about 5 years old, we moved to then Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He went to high school in Pittsburgh, graduated from high school there, and had really no symptoms until he was in his late teens, early 20s. At that time, I was in Georgia, a student at Georgia Tech. And the first real warning that we got was I was halfway through my college experience, and my mom called me and said my brother had a psychotic hospitalization. And it was really traumatic. I was a student, I was thinking about going to med school. I was a Georgia Tech undergraduate. And he was not the person who knew him to be. I think he was at that point a psychotic state, talking about being a figure in Star Trek, and was in love with like virtual characters in his mind. And so I always wondered and was curious, how can we improve this? He was in the hospital as normal, admitted for 7 days. I got out of the hospital, was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. In Georgia, we lived in Noonan, Georgia, got a psychiatrist, met with various psychiatrists. Really hard because at that time, he was on my parents' insurance. It was hard to find good care. I think he changed drugs 4 or 5 times and was readmitted within 2 years of his first episode. So, over the years, it kept happening. We would go to the doctor, get a drug cocktail. It would work for a year or so, or 6 months. Symptoms would get worse. He didn't adhere to his medication. He'd be readmitted to a psychotic hospitalization. And this would happen every year or two. It worsened and worsened to the point where my brother was so psychotic and he couldn't even function at all. Really, he was at home with my parents, and it was, and I was kind of helping also in my free time, and it was really hard to get him proper care, even on clozapine, really one of the most effective drugs for his condition. It didn't really help his psychosis. So a lot of frustrations here, not only with the medical care he received, but the medications were ultimately ineffective. He was a treatment-resistant case. So in my free time, I started a company, Neuralex, used voice as a marker for diagnosing schizophrenia, tried to partner with various pharmaceutical companies, clinical trial organizations. I live in Boston now. I try to get him enrolled in some novel, non-invasive electrical stimulation clinical studies here in Boston. Even amid all of these efforts, the healthcare system failed him. So I can say that, like, over the years, all of these things have led to a lot of frustration. He had ultimately be on a guardianship with my parents, to the point where my parents had to control all of his finances just so he could direct his medical care. And I'm happy to get to the questions as well in a second. And so I think like the ultimate, what actually happened in the end is about 7 months ago. I was living in Boston for about 3 years. It was COVID pandemic happened. I was probably my brother's closest friend. Being away for a while made him very isolated. He lost his job at Home Depot, which he was watering plants. Home Depot is very accommodating with his condition, and a lot of stressors came up, and ultimately led to him having suicidal ideation. Every time I was on the phone with him, I tried to say, you got to have hope. You have to have some sort of hope in your condition. We're working all these new treatments in Boston. We're trying to do all these things to help you, but it wasn't enough. And I think to Angela's points earlier, he was suffering every day of his life. He was unable to really function, and he didn't really have much hope. The medical system gave him no hope. And I think if there's anything we can do, is we need to find a way to give people that hope. We need to fund treatments where people feel and believe they are effective. When you go to physicians and doctors and even clinical trials, enroll in them, and they fail after 15 or 16 attempts, I think the hope is really hard to have for any individual suffering. I can say that. So I think with that being said, when my brother committed suicide, suffered and died by suicide, apologies for using that word, he had an issue where he really had no ability to have anyone to talk to. He wasn't in therapy. I think that there's something that really hit me immediately is grief, guilt, anger, frustration. I didn't really know who to talk to myself. It was really difficult that I didn't know, who to talk to, anyone that had experienced what he had experienced in my family. So I dealt with it by drawing out a lot of pictures. I had a hypergraphia moment where I thought a lot about our memories, and the way to honor him was to draw out illustrations. And I ended up illustrating about 34 images of our childhood and our life, and wrote and interwove philosophical aphorisms alongside those images. And for me, it was very meaningful because although he lived a short period of life here, he still had some things he taught us and taught me. And I didn't want him to be forgotten. It helped me a lot to cope. And I think art and its place to deal with grief is very a very good way to deal with it. I felt like getting all these images out, I could share them with my family. This is one illustration that I drew at the end. This was the last one that kind of illustrates my brother on the right-hand side, who's no longer here, and myself on the left-hand side. And it illustrates the past and all our memories and the future that I'm having. I'm getting married this year to my fiance, Jess. He's not going to be at my wedding this year. That was something that was really hard for me. But in some odd way, he's interwoven into it. And I think there's a way to emit sort of meaning in these experiences through art. And I think this is one way I dealt with it. And I think that might resonate with some of you if you're dealing with grief. But I still feel like he's here. And I think that gives me a lot of peace. And I wanted to share that anecdote. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I wanted to give that brief story. I know that was a little free flowing and I don't have a lot of time, so I'm probably at time. So I'm happy to answer some of the questions here. Let me read through that.
Jim, we'll actually address all the questions at the end, I think. So we can,
cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate you sharing your story and the book. If anyone has a chance to take a look, it's an incredible expression and just a wonderful story. Thank you so much, Jim. Let's move on to our last trivia question for the morning. What percentage of people were diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder in the past year? Give it some thought while we watch this next video.
My family are from Africa, and if anyone knows anything about African families, you will know that we don't really talk about mental health. Everybody is fine, and you have a facade which you portray every single day. But the reality is that when people come and tell you things that remind you of your own dirty little secret, that facade sometimes melts away. And it's about time that we start talking and start realizing when we have students who disclose that they are hurting, when you see students who are so clearly bipolar and don't have access to the resources they need to help them function. It's about time we start talking. It's about time that we stop brushing our secrets underneath the carpet and pretending that everything's okay and that everyone has the resources they need. Because quite honestly, we don't, and it's time.
Hi, I'm James Morrison. The stigma about mental health should be broken. I know it's terribly hard for some of us, but we should talk about it openly and freely whenever we can. For ourselves, yes, but also in service to others. We never know who's going to hear us and gain hope from our strength and experience. That's why I share the story of my history of addiction and recovery. If I can help one person, I've done what I was put here to do. As they say, you can't keep it if you don't give it away. Thank you.
So what percentage of people were diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder in the past year? If you answered D, 15%, you were correct. And if you wanted to think about how many people According to a United States national survey, approximately 14.5% of individuals aged 12 or over had a diagnosable SUD in the past year, including approximately 10.2% with an alcohol use disorder and 6.6% with an illicit drug use disorder. Our final speaker for this morning is Thomas with the Miami Recovery Project. I'm excited about Thomas as well, to welcome him.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Thomas Guerra, and I am a person in recovery from a substance use disorder and mental health illness. I'm also a clinician. I went to FIU and obtained my bachelor's degree and my master's degree in mental health counseling. As a result of being in recovery, I was able to go back and get my education. And honestly, I wanted to give back because I am in recovery and I know what it's like to feel hopeless and what it's like to, help other people and make a difference in people's lives. And doing so, I chose to go the mental health counseling route, and I was able to graduate with my master's and start working in the field. And, but my favorite part was working with individuals, coming in and seeing them get that spark of hope, seeing a change to start happening, and really, making a difference in their lives, and using my own experience to help with that. But along the way, I did find out that there was more to it than just, working one-on-one with individuals and sitting in group with individuals. I know there's so many people that we've had come through the treatment centers, and I worked at a couple different ones through my internship and through beginning my career. You talked about 28 days being in treatment. That's usually when we're barely getting started with an individual, when somebody starts to open up, when somebody starts feeling comfortable in the group. Sometimes it takes longer than that, and the hardest part is when somebody is starting to open up and starting to see the difference, and then we find out that the insurance is not going to cover any more days, or that they're not financially able to continue in the treatment. And it took so much from them to first of all ask for help, but second of all to be able to get to a point of opening up in the treatment setting, and it was one of the hardest parts. And then we have to make a referral, and then you don't know if that person is going to take that referral and start all over from the beginning, to build that rapport with the clinician, to build that connection with the people in the next treatment center or group. And even if they have the capability to finance another treatment center, or if they have insurance that will continue in a different treatment center, that was really the hardest part. And it's happened so many times, and every insurance company is different. Some of them we have to call, and it wasn't me calling, but our administrative side would have to call on a regular basis just to get another day, to get another week, to get another, and have to give so much and fight hard to keep them in treatment. And it shouldn't be that way. And for other illnesses, for physical illnesses, it's not that hard. And not only that, there's a long follow-ups afterward. Once completing treatment, there's a follow-up 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. When it comes to mental health and substance use disorders, that's usually not the case. When somebody's able to, complete treatment, usually there's no follow-up. And that's even more of a problem as well, because we know that the longer somebody stays engaged within the continuum of care, they have a higher success of staying in recovery. But getting out of treatment and then going into the environment that was the stressor of causing that mental health or causing that substance use disorder, so we want people to stay engaged, but they don't have the ability to continue maybe going to aftercare, maybe going to a sober living facility. After exhausting all their finances, it's hard to continue. And I speak on this as well as being a person in recovery and being able to go to treatment. And I went a couple different times. When I was younger, I was covered under my parents' insurance, and I had the ability to stay the first time I was in treatment. But as I got older, it became more difficult and more difficult. And then having the very difficult decision of like, all right, I'm doing good. I have 30 days in treatment, but I have to decide if we're gonna get another month of treatment. Do we have the money to do that? Insurance is up. How do we proceed? And luckily, my family had the resources to do that, but it took a big toll on our finances. And that happens on the regular, where families have to make a decision. Are we going to put this life savings? Are we going to put this money into our family member? And if we don't, what's going to happen? And there's so much fear going on at that point to help that person, and people will put their house up for sale. People will sell whatever they have to sell to get their family member into treatment another month. And it's sad when, you're put with that decision to make, and if you don't do it, the guilt that you'll feel if that person doesn't get the help. So along the way, I kind of drifted away from the treatment, my treatment career, and I started a nonprofit called the Miami Recovery Project. And part of starting that was because of the issues with finances and treatment, and not wanting to have to turn anybody away because of that. And so Miami Recovery Project, although we are not a treatment or clinical organization, we do provide peer support services and referral services. So we don't charge anybody anything for the services we provide. We don't go through insurance. But what we do have is everybody that works at our organization is a person in recovery from mental health and substance use. And we have that lived experience that can help people navigate any part of their recovery, whether they're at the beginning or they have a few months under their belt or have a few years. We can help them figure out what their next plan is going to be. We do work a lot with treatment centers and detoxes and housing. And it's just, it is also a little bit of a shuffle or a dance to figure out what place is going to take what person. Most of the providers we work with are also nonprofit. And so there's a lot of wait lists, which is also a different problem, with, versus profit versus nonprofit. But the goal is to meet people where they're at, to help those people, and to not give up on anybody. Try to get them into the treatment center that they can get into. Unfortunately, we can't pick and choose the ones that are going to have the best facilities. But the goal is to get somebody into the treatment center, and you can really find recovery at any treatment center if that person has that willingness. And the biggest problem is when I saw that person that had the willingness and the fight and the wanting to recover, and then the insurance and the treatment center doesn't cover, or they don't have the money. So we try to connect those people and get them the services that they need. We know that most people that need treatment are not going to get that treatment. I believe the numbers are about 9 out of 10 people that need treatment will not get treatment. And the big issue is the insurance, the finances, but there's also the stigma attached to mental health and substance use that is also a barrier. So I commend the RAN because you're providing scholarships and helping advocate for this issue, that it is a very huge issue, and it's going to be a state issue. It's going to be a national issue, and we gotta speak up. And the louder our voices are, the more they'll hear us, and we can make some changes on a national level. So I appreciate you having me here to share. I'm open to taking questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. We appreciate you being here, appreciate your comments. We obviously would like to thank everyone that has been involved with our program today. But before we wrap up, we do have a few questions, a little bit of Q&A we would like to run through. Most of these questions are directed at specific panelists, but not all of them. So I will just go through the list in order. So the first question that came through is actually for Jim. The question says, given what your family learned through your experience, what advice would you give to family members or loved ones of those suffering from mental illness? And or do you have any advice on how to best manage understanding your insurance and finding treatment for your loved ones?
Yeah, I think access to the right care is very hard. Depends on your state, I think, on what the quality of care is and what health system you're a part of. We had very different care in Texas, for example, than in Georgia. And I'm in Boston, and there's a lot of research being done here. So I think one, it varies tremendously across the US. But I can say that for paying for services, if you're under 26, you can be on your parents' insurance plan. It really helped us because my mom was a teacher. She had a health plan, and my brother was on it as a family plan. After 26, we got him on Medicaid, and we also got him enrolled into Social Security benefits, and it really helped to pay medical bills. So definitely encourage getting onto Social Security. I think he got like $800 check or $600 check every month. That helped not only with medical, but living expense and other things as well. The problem with some of these health plans is that you have a limited number of hospital days, lifetime hospital days. When you end up running out, and then there's a lot of issues with that. And we still haven't resolved that, I think, in any plan. And I guess like with family resources and other things, I think it's good to connect with other families, support groups as well, because you can learn from them. We went through NAMI. We went to some support groups as a family through NAMI, and we learned a lot about other individuals with schizophrenia and how they managed their care and what doctors and physicians were good. The last thing I'll say is if you can get enrolled into any clinical study, if you find your treatment isn't working, there's no treatment that's working for you, there's a lot of clinical studies ongoing at different institutions. I'm in Massachusetts. There's a lot going on at Massachusetts General Hospital. If you're willing and open to clinical studies, there's a lot of work being done on psychedelics and things like that here in Boston and elsewhere. So I think there's always other opportunities to try new things clinically. I just wanted to say that here, and I'd say a lot of the work is centered here in Boston, but there's many institutions that have enrolled in these trials, and where you're at, there's probably places at Emory and or other places. So we did that with my brother. We never got him enrolled in a trial. We tried to get him enrolled. He was resistant. But if you're open and your family's open, I think that's another opportunity, which we did explore, but we failed at that. So I wish we had tried, because I think that would have been a good opportunity for him.
Got it. Thank you, Jim. We appreciate that. And just for reference, for those dialed in, NAMI, the organization he referenced, is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they are prevalent in every state and every county. Obviously, there's various programs depending on the location, but they are a resource for you and your family. The next question we have is for Thomas. So this question says, from a clinical perspective, how can clients or patients be sure that they're understanding their benefits correctly? If they're not covered, when and how can they find free or low-cost resources to assist them?
Okay, sure. On the insurance side, I'm not as privy on that. I would call the insurance company and have them explain to you when it comes to mental health, and substance use, because it's always going to be different than everything than the rest of the services that you're able to receive. On the low costs and resources, there is a RCO in every state, some more than others. RCO is a recovery community organization, which is the type of organization that Miami Recovery Project is. And basically, we are the one-stop shop of referral and connecting people to the resources they need. You can contact us at miamirecoveryproject.org, and we have the local resources. But if you're looking for the local recovery community organization in your area, you can go to Faces and Voices of Recovery.org. They will list. They have a list of all the local recovery community organizations. I'm located in Florida, in Miami, and so part of an organization called Floridians for Recovery. So they have also a webpage where you can find Florida-based RCOs, and they have resources listed. So I would connect with the local RCO, and they can connect you with housing, with detox, with treatment, help you with employment, everything that is an issue in early recovery. They can help you out, the local RCO. So if you go to Faces and Voices of Recovery.org, they'll have that. And if you're in Miami, we'd be happy to help you out and work with you. MiamiRecoveryProject.org. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. While I do have a question or two for Ange, Thomas, since we're on the topic, I had a question come in that I think speaks or connects with what you just said. So I'm going to ask you two in a row. What do you think the biggest obstacle is for addicts after leaving a recovery program? What do you wish could be in place to help those individuals? In other words, where do you see gaps in the recovery process after the treatment facility?
Well, with treatment, we know that most places are not going to be more than 90 days if you're lucky, and that's when you're just getting started. And the environment that you're going back into is a very tricky situation. Some people are going back to an environment where other people are using or drinking, or it's a trigger to their mental health situations. So, the longer you stay within the continuum of care, the higher the likelihood of staying in recovery. And the continuum of care, of course, you have the detox residential, but then you have intensive outpatient. But also you have the component of sober living. If that environment is not conducive to your recovery, maybe sober living is a good option, just to get you some time under your belt and to connect with other people that are going through the same thing is huge. To get more experience in being in recovery, because if you're new to recovery, you're learning everything, how to do everything for the first time. Whether it's being happy, grieving, coping with different life situations. But now you're doing it without the help of the substances you were using. And also there's other resources if you're a student and trying to get back to school. There's collegiate recovery programs in a lot of the universities that are very helpful, and that's a organization, a student organization, or a university-led program with students that are going through the same thing. So when you're going back to school, you don't feel as alone as it is, because it is difficult, especially going to college and there's so many people using, drinking, and you feel like you're by yourself. But if you're able to connect with the people that are doing the same thing, is huge. And that goes with everything. Connecting with local meetings, support groups, just so you can connect and relate to other people. That's one of the biggest tools, is connecting with other people that are going through the same thing. You don't have to do this alone. We know that the odds of staying in recovery once you get connected with people is a lot better. We don't want you to be alone. We want you to connect. So checking out the local support groups. NAMI's a great connection as well, but also 12 Steps, Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery, There's a number of different modalities of finding recovery. It's just finding those local resources. And again, the RCOs can help with that and helping you find what your recovery is going to look like. Awesome.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate that. We do have 2 questions for Angela. They somewhat tie into each other, but they definitely tie into what she discussed when she shared her story. The first is, on average, how soon do people know their insurance dropped them, or when will we find out? And then the second actually has to do with the types of medication. So it says, it's so challenging to find psychiatrists who are mindful about the type of medications they are prescribing to those struggling with both mental health and substance abuse disorders. Is there somewhere one can go to look for psychiatrists who either prescribe more non-narcotic medications or that are geared to treat those with these 2 disorders, which unfortunately go hand in hand? So Ange, thoughts on that?
Great questions. Okay, the first question is a little easier for me to respond to. Well, I say it's a little easier because it sucks the most, and I experienced it and saw it the most. That's why it's easier. So the way most insurance works is they will allot you a certain number of days, and then at the end of that period, they will go under review and decide if they're going to allot more days. So in my personal example, it was every 10 days. And so on day 10, I was notified my insurance had dropped me, which meant that day I suddenly realized I was no longer covered and I had to book an airline flight from Arizona back to Georgia to fly back home the very next day. I didn't have resources to be able to prescribe the new medication that was what they had had time to even try. So I was desperately trying to find a psychiatrist who was able to handle that. And the reason I said this shouldn't have been surprising to me is because I'd also observed others that the exact same thing had happened. I mean, we would sit and drink coffee and prepare for our group therapy, and suddenly, you know, Sarah would not be there, and everyone would say, "Where's Sarah?" And then someone would say, "Oh, her insurance dropped her yesterday." And so not only did that impact Sarah, who had to experience that, it also impacted the rest of us, because suddenly we had this paranoia and fear every day. So we're trying to recover and focus on our group therapy, and at the exact same time, I'm thinking in my head, is my insurance going to drop me? Am I suddenly going to get kicked out? So instead of being able to focus truly on healing and on recovery, we have this dichotomy of thoughts in our head that are so overwhelming. In regards to the medication, one thing that I'll say is very important is that individuals interview their psychiatrist, okay? Most psychiatrists, I will say most, but my experience with a lot of psychiatrists and what I hear is they want to spend 15 minutes with you, prescribe a medication, and then move on to the next patient. So I was very lucky to find one who he actually observed that my situation was one that the medications were a bridge to recovery. So that was really important for him to understand that. The second thing that we've had provided by one of our team members who is actually in medical school is that, so I'm reading the comment that he made, was addiction medication specialist. Really? Okay. Yeah. So that's someone who's board certified psychiatrist and they have a subspecialty certification in addiction medication, or they're eligible for such subspecialty certification in addiction medication. And this is really important because what I had happen to me as well is I had, when I was in treatment, a psychiatrist would look at my profile and say, "Oh, give her this medication." Well, I ended up having to be discharged on a highly addictive medication. And that's not what you want for someone that needs long-term care, because then all it does is the same instance we see in the opioid situation, is it takes something that was for pain that should have been short-term and makes it long-term. So when you're looking for someone, make sure you try and look at their qualifications and interview them. Do not just say, I have to go to this one psychiatrist and just believe everything they say. Interview your psychiatrist. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ange. Appreciate it. I believe that is all the time we have today for Q&A. However, if other folks in attendance have questions, you can still put them in the chat box and we will email you answers or reach out to you, or you can always email us directly at info@recoverynetwork.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Erin. RAN is dedicated to reducing the financial burden associated with treatment for mental health disorders, processing disorders, substance abuse, trauma, healing, and sexual identity challenges. RAN seeks client-centered and solution-focused approaches to its services. RAN utilizes best practice guidelines, evidence-based tactics, while embracing the belief that mental health issues are best treated with a community setting. We'd like to thank our board of directors. This event would not be possible if it wasn't for the hard work of everybody on the board. And also thank you to Angela Nelms, Jim Schwabel, Thomas Guerra for sharing their stories here today. And lastly, thank you for spending your time with us at our inaugural event. Join us next quarter in October and watch our Facebook. Join us next quarter in October for our next event. And check out our Facebook and Twitter for the details. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us.